Let's dive in. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you everyone for joining. Today is our first webinar of the first webinar session of our 4-day sustainability webinar series of the RT Park. And today we're gonna have 4 speakers, 3 presentations, and a Q&A session at the end. So, but feel free to use the chat box function at the bottom of the screen throughout the presentations to ask any questions you have. And I'm really glad to invite Carl Knight to give us an opening speech to set up the stage for the session today. So Carl, I will leave the floor to you now.
All right, thank you very much, Ihan. Thank you very much, RT Park and everybody. It's great to be here. I am the governor's chief of staff, but my real passion for the last several years has actually been energy and sustainability. So it's always good to get away from some of the other issues that we have to deal with in the governor's office. Pension systems and payroll and all sorts of other not as exciting exploits, and to be able to actually talk about energy and sustainability, since that's actually something that I have quite a passion for. The Virgin Islands, we have been at this for some time. By background, I came up in the power industry. Our utility industry here is, our sole public power utility has always had its challenges. As you will find in any small island developing nation, their power generation is quite a challenge. And so I started my career grappling with those issues. And then at some later point, I started to realize that there were better alternatives and better approaches. And I was privileged enough to have an opportunity to serve as an energy policy advisor for former Governor John DeYoung and get exposure in that arena. And then at some point, he actually appointed me to be the director of the energy office. And so that allowed us to do some really wonderful things, create some really wonderful partnerships. I see some familiar faces of some of the folks that we've worked with over the years and trying to do some innovative things on the energy front. And we did create a very unique partnership with the U.S. Department of Energy. At one point, it was called the Energy Development in Island Nations. They were looking at small island developing nations and partnering them up with larger countries that had more developed energy infrastructure. It was a natural fit to partner the U.S. Virgin Islands with the U.S. government. New Zealand was part of that conversation. I think there was at least one other country that was part of that conversation, working with some smaller jurisdictions. And we were able to really map out a clean energy roadmap that shows all the possibilities, shows what made sense, what didn't make sense, what could be commercialized, what was not really ready for prime time. And we've been armed with that knowledge for the last several years and been slowly pursuing and developing that energy infrastructure. We're very comprehensive in our thinking here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We are focused on yes, renewable energy. We are very much interested in photovoltaics, solar water heating. We're very much interested in wind power. We pushed very aggressive programs back when this was all pioneering stuff like on-bill repayment and those sort of things. We were very glad to be some of the first to market on some of these concepts and policies, things like net metering, et cetera. And so we led the way on pioneering those things. I just did my weekend work this past weekend was doing some repairs on my solar water heater at my personal home. I am I'm in the minority in my neighborhood. Most of my neighbors actually have photovoltaic panels and solar water heaters. I just have the solar water heater, but we were able to kind of make that a more common technology here in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and most importantly, start to train up a workforce that was familiar with working with those things. We're doing it again on the renewable front. We have some major utility scale projects. We're pushing rooftop solar, we're pushing net billing. We have a lot of different initiatives. I'm sure our Director Fleming might expound on a bit for you. And so we are once again pushing the envelope on what we can do with renewables, building the workforce, and building the capacity to show other developing islands this is the way forward to wean yourself off of your dependency on fossil fuel. But like I said, we're very comprehensive, so we also do a lot of work in the energy efficiency space. We're very much interested in pushing energy efficiency initiatives and getting back to those sort of programs that show consumers that the lowest hanging fruit is always the kilowatt hour that you say, that's the cheapest kilowatt hour. And so we've done a lot of things. I remember US Virgin Islands was out on the forefront and pushing things like LED technology. When the rest of the country was embracing compact fluorescent light bulbs, we were pushing LED light bulbs. All of this, of course, we had great incentive to do these things because our price of electricity is through the roof. So while I brag about how aggressive we are in embracing clean energy and sustainability, I mean, yes, we did have a very strong economic incentive to do this. And so, yeah, we always push the envelope and continue to do so on energy efficiency technology. We have some more work to do there with things like hybrid water heaters and some other technologies that we're still trying to become more commercialized and commonplace, but that's part and parcel of our thinking. We are also interested in the transportation space, and I know the Energy Office has great ideas and working in concert with our property and procurement to use the government as a to seed the market and to lead by example and create for the commercial space, show them how this technology can be deployed, show them how it can work, and most importantly, build some of the infrastructure to support the private sector space in that area. And we're also, of course, always looking at just general alternatives, moving from dirty fossil fuels to cleaner fossil fuels. We did that before when we moved to propane generation just to get ourselves off of oil generation for utility scale power. We're getting ready to make another evolution in that. We're starting some preliminary discussions, and we continue to try to move towards creating cleaner sources of energy and creating more sustainable sources of energy. So if you look at our response to the natural disasters in 2017, Hurricanes Irma and Maria that struck the territory, most of our planning was how do we capitalize on the rebuild of our infrastructure to build the capacity to add some of these things, wind, solar, to rebuild our structures in more energy efficient manners and to utilize first-class technology, first-rate technology in our building systems, in our building envelope. How do we take advantage of those storms to redo our building codes and create opportunities for building stronger and more sustainably? And so that's the path that we're on. We're very excited to be on that path. I think we have a really good team that Governor Albert Bryan has built. Director Kyle Fleming in the Energy Office, he started off in the private sector, really aggressive and gung-ho about pushing clean energy, and now he's in a role where he gets to set energy policy for the entire US Virgin Islands. You have the benefit of me sitting in the governor's office, right next to the governor, having come up through that industry and having the ability to influence from my level policies throughout the government. And make sure that our policies are in concert with that overall vision for the US Virgin Islands. And we even, in using that clout that we have here in the governor's office, we actually created a chief of sustainability at our Department of Property and Procurement to kind of institutionalize some of the things that we want to do as a government. So the former Deputy Director of the Energy Office, Joseph Cantois, was actually recently hired into the position of Chief Sustainability Officer there at the Department of Property and Procurement. So we're making a very serious push. We do want to incentivize. We look at this as an industry cluster, and we know that the work that we do has different spin-offs that, so it's the work that the power utilities doing on their transmission system benefits from folks who are making investments in battery storage technology, or the work that we're doing on clean energy requires installers, and so that requires a partnership with the university. So we look at the overall industry cluster and all the different component parts that are necessary to be successful in this space. And most importantly, with everything that we do, the folks at Rocky Mountain Institute and some of the other partners that we've worked with over the years can tell you, we're always trying to export our ideas. We always want to be, you know, we don't mind being the guinea pigs for certain things, such as the clean energy industry. And we always want to be in a position to lead the way for the other US Pacific territories, to lead the way for other small island developing nations, to lead the way for the rest of the Caribbean region. We always want to be able to demonstrate this is how it's done, and this is how it's done well. So we have the RT Park has our full support at all times on anything related to sustainability. And it's our pleasure to be able to support your efforts in that arena. Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Carl, for your opening speech. We're really excited to hear the government's commitment to renewable energy development and energy efficiency. As you mentioned, Kyle Fleming is our energy director at the US Virgin Islands Energy Office, and he's also the energy commissioner for the territory. It's our pleasure to invite Kyle to give us more details on the USVI energy policy, markets, and the regulatory environment, as he's leading the efforts of the energy policy development in the US Virgin Islands. Okay, now Kyle, please take it away.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm just gonna get this PowerPoint set up here.
Yeah, you can share your screen. Okay, perfect.
Sure. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Carl, for a great introduction and a segue into a little bit deeper dive specifically. And thank you, Johanna, as well for the introduction. As I mentioned, my name is Kyle Fleming. I'm the director of the Virgin Islands Energy Office. Myself, I'm also the Planning and Economic Development Committee Chair on the board for the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority. My background briefly stems from a Master's of Science in Energy Systems from Northeastern University, as well as over 10 years of holistic experience within the energy industry. So really packaging some significant amount of time focused in various sectors of this industry to bring my perspective and expertise to the Virgin Islands Energy Office, which, as Mr. Knight has already alluded to, the Energy Office is positioning itself and trying to position the Virgin Islands really at the forefront of technology as it stands relative to the both renewable energy and energy efficiency space, and also just sustainability space and utilization of abundant resources. So just a brief overview and introduction to the Energy Office. We are the designated state agency charged with planning, oversight, and coordination of energy programs according to federal law. Our mission is focused on enabling the deployment of sustainable energy policies and projects here within the Virgin Islands. And we do this a lot, largely supported by both federal grants and technical assistance provided by the U.S. Department of Energy and the U.S. Department of Interior. This actually positions us and creates a position for not only our office, but the Virgin Islands to really be aggressive in our adoption and deployment of various energy technologies and strategies and policies by the fact that we have this federal assistance to enable these. It's one of the unique things that the Virgin Islands has that a lot of other islands in the Caribbean region don't have access to. So we definitely try to leverage those resources as much as we can and extend those resources to people who are looking at developing and leveraging the Virgin Islands as a base of operations. Just to kind of give a deeper dive also into what the energy landscape here in the territory is. As some of you may know, the Virgin Islands has the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority as our centralized energy source. They both generate, transmit, distribute and direct sale of electricity to about 55,000 customers territory-wide. There's two distinct grids. St. Croix has its own generation facility, which supplies the island of St. Croix exclusively. St. Thomas has its own dedicated generation facility as well, which serves both St. Thomas and St. John, which are connected by undersea cable. One of the big projects that are currently underway in the territory is looking at providing additional generation resources on the island of St. John to develop a microgrid on that island. So that way, while it still may be connected to St. Thomas, it's not going to be dependent on the undersea cable to allow for generation support in the event of emergencies, and by that being able to bolster the resiliency on that island. That's just one example of really trying to push the envelope relative to bringing microgrid technology to address a significant issue that the territory has faced in the past during natural disasters. Just to talk briefly about the rates, because I think that as Mr. Knight alluded to earlier as well, are both residential and commercial rates of 41 cents per kilowatt hour and 45 cents a kilowatt hour are also a major driving factor in enabling a lot of advancements in technology deployment and adoption here. These costs make investments a lot more, the return on investment, very favorable for even some of the more novel technologies. And so we are able to benefit from that in that sense. However, it's still a number that we're constantly chasing and trying to improve and bring down. And that's been primarily done through improvements to the generation mix. So the utility burns primarily liquid propane gas as a fuel source. That has brought down not only the cost of fuel, but also improved the efficiency of the generation mix on both St. Thomas and St. Croix. And they use that mix to provide about 41 megawatts of peak demand on St. Croix, on 50 megawatts of peak demand on St. Thomas and St. John, with St. John accounting for about 7 megawatts. We know there's a lot of interest in different ways of bringing different technologies to the territory. So I think it's important to understand essentially where our energy demands are currently to see what type of various technologies can really work into addressing that need and demand efficiently. I won't go too deeply into this because there's a lot of resources online as well, but just want to introduce the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority does have an integrated resource plan that was updated in 2019 and available online. A simple Google search of VI WAPA 2019 IRP will direct you to the PDF, which details a long forecasting of generation considerations and investment strategies for the utility as it aims to bring down the cost of electricity and also provide more reliable and sustainable energy throughout the territory. And I know we're obviously here to talk about renewable energy, so I'll focus a little bit more now on the renewable energy space. And so I'll start with the utility, in the utility realm, and then we'll transition to the commercial and residential side. So from the utility scale solar, the territory currently has two utility scale solar PPAs in the Virgin Islands. One on St. Croix, which is 4 megawatts, and it is currently operational. There's also a 5 megawatt was destroyed, unfortunately, but is in the process of being rebuilt. So once complete, we'll have 9 megawatts of power purchase agreement configured renewable energy throughout the territory. But that's by no means the limit to what is anticipated for the territory. The utility alone has over 50 megawatts of solar and wind projects anticipated territory-wide. And those are going to be complemented, a majority of those will be complemented by battery storage to ensure the intermittency challenges of those renewables can still be mitigated and leveraged beneficially to the territory. And this once again highlights the competitive advantage that the territory has in being able to leverage federal funds to execute these ambitious and aggressive energy goals. As Mr. Knight mentioned before, we've been able to utilize some of the FEMA funding that been made available following the wake of the 2017 storms to support the development of a number of these projects, which not only brings the projects to the territory, but has the possibility to bring these projects at a lower cost than having to rate base these investments. So from a deployability standpoint, it really provides the best bang for our buck in this way. And so this is one of the structures that we've been pursuing, which also brings not just the technology, but also a high demand for a competent workforce within the territory as well. As I see these megawatts, I think of not just the power production, but I think of the jobs production, which vary from everything from installers to project managers to designers. And so I really see a renaissance of energy work happening in the territory in the coming years. Shifting over to the policy side, so the territory also has approximately 15 megawatts of distributed renewable energy that's been deployed throughout the territory over the last 10 years. And this 50 megawatts accounts for the net energy metering program, net metering as most people know it, which is popular throughout the states as well as some of the other outlying territories, which allowed for interconnection of grid-tied renewables, both wind and solar. We also have a substantial amount of the distributed generation that has come following the 2017 storms, where we've seen a high demand for one, resiliency. People realizing that our vulnerable nature here in the territory, in the Caribbean, means that as resilient of a central grid as we may have, having some additional resiliency and distributed resiliency is an option that people have been pursuing, especially as technology prices have come down and more competition in that space has risen. To address the recent uptick in distributed systems, as well as to fill a void in policy, the Energy Office, in partnership with the Department of Natural Resources and the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority, developed a net energy billing program. This is our new interconnection strategy and process that allows for the interconnection of distributed renewable energy resources throughout the territory. We also provide a streamlined online permitting process, which initially was really just expedite the process, but now in the world of COVID-19, it's also serving to limit the applicant government agency interaction by transitioning the permitting process to online, as well as expediting the process so that way we can handle the demand of distributed resources being brought onto the grid. The standby tariff is another policy that really address the larger scale commercial and commercial and industrial size systems, where what we have seen is there's a significant amount of primary on-site generation from large commercial and industrial players. However, they still seek to interconnect to the WAPA grid at times if their system happens to be down for maintenance or any issues. And so the standby tariff was put in place to ensure that for these larger facilities that need access to the grid, that the infrastructure costs associated with providing that access is there. So we look at this for, as I said, for the larger commercial industrial players, it's a policy to allow them to both produce on-site, but still have access to the grid in a sustainable way. And the qualifying facility is a designation for companies or development groups that are interested in actually proposing power purchase agreements to the utility directly. In order for any company or any developer to enter into a PPA, they must first be designated a qualifying facility, and that takes approval from the Public Services Commission here in the territory, which is known as the PSC. That being said, there's a lot of different ways in which distributed generation, renewable energy can be incorporated here in the territory. We've been, at the Energy Office, we're constantly working to make sure that these policies are up to date and align with the demands of the industry, as well as the demands of the community as well. And we want to create a solar-friendly environment here in the territory, as well as renewable friendly altogether, as we try to utilize as much resources as we can on site. Given our remote location, it's essential for us. And I'll briefly just go through some of the trends in the commercial and residential industries. So from the commercial standpoint, we have seen a high penetration of primary on-site generation. I'm sure Mike will talk a little bit about some of the projects that he's worked on here in the territory. But yeah, we've seen a lot of major players, everything from movie theaters to hotels to industrial facilities as well, opt for adopting their own on-site generation, which has been typically a mix of either fossil fuel batteries and solar as well, or just dedicated fossil fuel applications as well. This adoption has been driven by the high utility prices as well as the frequency of utility outages. And as technology costs have continued to go down in these ways, we've seen adoption in the Virgin Islands pick up as well. So we're trying to ensure that the policy matches the technology availability, so that way we do this in a sustainable way, make sure the adoption happens in a sustainable way. On the residential front, once again, we still see a high penetration of solar and solar plus storage. The 2017 storms have really brought up the battery storage adoption in the territory, which has been, I think, a unique opportunity that we've had the ability to leverage. I think there's a lot of possibilities from, and still to be exposed possibilities from the battery storage market that we have here in the territory, as well as we continue to see the adoption grow. There's a wide range across the territory of various installers and service providers. So we've seen a pretty consistent growth across all three islands throughout this time. But one thing we have identified, and from the Energy Office, we're certainly looking at addressing is some of the energy equity challenges. While we have seen adoption grow, it's been very much so on the low to moderate income sectors of our community have had limited access to their benefits. And so trying to address the cost barriers is a major consideration for us. We're currently in the process of developing some grant programs that we hope to address and bridge the gap between these cost barriers and some of the members of our community that could use the savings and resiliency measures that this technology can provide. And finally, I'll just kind of briefly tap into financing as we kind of line up with the bridging the gap. We've seen, even despite the global trends, renewable energy financing is a relatively emerging industry here in the Virgin Islands, where for years, while the technology was growing and the financing models were growing, we still saw a lot of cash sales relative to these projects, where now we're seeing a bit more involvement from the local banks, as well as some expansions in private financing mechanisms, such as lease agreements for installations. Once again, I think the cost of electricity here in the territory makes these financing models more agreeable and approachable from both the residential and commercial side. But we realize that there's still voids in that system that need to be addressed. And as a result, the government of Virgin Islands has also been looking at financing mechanisms that we can enable within the territory as well, that opens up that access on a broader scale in a sustainable way to ensure that ultimately affordable resiliency can be enabled through the progressive energy goals and structures that we have here in the territory. So I didn't want to get too deep, but I figured I'd leave it open for questions during, I think we have a question and answer discussion later on. I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of things that are happening here in the territory and even more things to come. Look forward to any questions at the end, and happy to respond. And also feel free to reach out to me via email if possible.
Great, thank you so much, Kyle. I just want to encourage everyone to use the chat box function to type any questions you may have throughout the presentations. And this presentation will also be sent to everyone through email in the next few days, and you will have the opportunity to talk to Kyle one-on-one if you have specific questions for him. Okay, thank you again, Kyle, for the amazing presentation. So US Virgin Islands collaborate throughout the Caribbean region with other nations to advance energy efficiency and renewable energy development. And the Rocky Mountain Institute plays a very important role in bringing together stakeholders across different sectors and from different countries in the Caribbean region to advance our renewable energy agenda. Now, let's welcome Chris from the Rocky Mountain Institute to discuss Rocky Mountain Institute's efforts in the Caribbean region in terms of renewable energy deployment and energy efficiency. Chris, now please take it away.
All right, great. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me. Just want to make sure I get a thumbs up that you guys can see the screen. All good? Okay, yep. Great. Well, I'm not going to go too deep into the Rocky Mountain Institute history. Those of you who are not familiar, it's a 35-year-old plus think tank. It's been around. Our founder, Amory Lovins, is kind of like the Albert Einstein, or great grandfather of energy efficiency. So you can look him up and see his story. But he's our founder, and we are now not just doing domestic energy policy and energy efficiency, but all across the globe, really helping to accelerate and advance renewable energy and energy technologies for a low carbon and sustainable world. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our program and then talk about what the markets are looking like in various places in the Caribbean and how that's applicable to the USVI. So why the USVI in the Caribbean? Why do they matter to a large think tank? And I think that the islands are one of the forefront programs of RMI because we get to see pure economics at play. As Kyle mentioned earlier, as well as Mr. Knight, USVI has one of the highest energy costs across the Caribbean. In fact, it's higher than the averages that we see here. So that allows for a pure market play for competing solutions to fossil fuels. So that really is interesting to RMI, who really likes to utilize open markets and economics. And plus, islands are on the forefront of climate change, and we really need to be securing islands' energy systems and learning those lessons and how they can apply to continental systems as typhoons and hurricanes and cyclones across all the ocean get bigger and more prominent. So RMI is all across the Caribbean. You'll notice that we're not in the Spanish-speaking countries to a large degree, but we are in Puerto Rico, most of CARICOM, recently in USVI and Puerto Rico. We also are in the continental countries of Guyana and Belize, which are CARICOM members. So our program has 3 pillars. There's the planning, projects, and knowledge exchange pillars. And all of them are really important to drive institutional change in utilities and governments across the regions. What we're able to do is bring a common fact base, bring a very neutral, NGO approach and tone to the process, and help utilities and governments really map out what makes the most sense for their island or their jurisdiction when it comes to both cost and resilience and jobs and all of the other attributes that they're looking forward to advance. And we've been really successful the last 6 years. We've been able to put in the ground about 76 megawatts across the portfolio, leverage about $200 million in renewable energy investment. And it's been really exciting because generally these are the very first projects in those jurisdictions. Maybe more importantly, we've been able to galvanize a lot of practitioners in the space with CARILEC, which is the Association of Caribbean Utilities in the region. So we have over 1,000 active users on CARIC, which is the knowledge exchange platform, and it really allows regulators and government officials and utilities to kind of trade ideas, because the road in energy transition is challenging, it is bumpy, and then there are a lot of challenges along the way. So there's me and my team there in Bahamas. We commissioned about close to a megawatt solar parking canopy That solar parking canopy is the very first in the region at a Category 5 specification. It was also the very first, quasi utility scale project in the Bahamas. And so that is operated by their utility BPL. And we've also been a part of many of the other first projects in the Caribbean as they're listed here. And I think it's important that a nonprofit with grant resources is able to do this, because it really allows for a mature market to follow in our wake. So instead of early adopters and early developers coming in and spending a lot of money on soft costs and travel and trying to get regulations and legislation and utilities on board, we can kind of take that all on the chin and do that, and then hopefully leave a good precedent for the commercial, residential, and utility markets to follow. So I think that's been the main takeaway from a lot of our early work. I mentioned earlier, CAREC. I encourage everybody who's an energy practitioner to visit community.carelot.org. The URL is there, and I can make these slides available. But it really is a great resource for posting questions and getting competent and professional answers from really the other members of the community who are there in CARICOM and some of the U.S. And other overseas territories. We also do quite a bit of thought leadership. Matter of fact, RMI is kind of known for their white papers and thought leadership. We don't do as much as we probably should in the islands because we're actually busy doing development work. But some notable examples, you'll notice that the solar under storm cover may be familiar to some of you in the USVI. That is the 5 megawatt failure that happened the Dano project that was mentioned earlier. I think that is under a PPA and will be rebuilt. It will be rebuilt to Category 5 solar under storm standards. In fact, the developer was just on a workshop with us earlier today, kind of picking up some tricks of the trade. But the bottom line is solar can be secured to Category 5. We've got many notable examples in the region, and these new best practices have been adopted by many utilities, as well as the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Building Code, as well as the Caribbean Development Bank's underwriting process for financing solar farms. We've also done quite a bit of work on renewable energy microgrids, which I'll get into deeper in a little bit, and then really have a great team in Puerto Rico, helping Puerto Rico sort out their energy challenges. And that will look very much like a segment at Microgrid when it's all said and done. And last but not least, we've got a very special team member who just joined us, Siana Tilak Singh from Trinidad. She had a recent TED Talk that was, really reflective of the struggles, not just of Trinidad, but many Caribbean countries when it comes to energy transition. She was able to do a really nice job on a TED Talk last year. And last but not least, my team and I were featured on 60 Minutes March 1st, and I think that's still available on the CBS app. And that was about renewable energy microgrids in the Bahamas as a reaction to both Hurricane Irma and recently to Hurricane Dorian. But it's really all about steel on the ground. So that's what we're really focused on. We're really focused on, letting projects kind of lead the way to help inform good policy and good regulations, so utilities can learn firsthand what these systems will do on their grid and how to operate them and dispatch them. And it really is a community and a team environment that we try to build, because none of us have the answers. We're really on the forefront of a lot of these technologies. All right, so here's a slide you guys are probably most interested in, and Cobb did a really nice job of summarizing this in the USVI. But outside the USVI, really, if I was an entrepreneur, I would be looking at the behind the meter solar market. It's kind of a mixed bag all across the islands of what's permissible, how big you can do a project, how do you interconnect, is it going to be net billing or buy all, sell all? But all in all, solar energy is a lot cheaper than the grid. So there's many innovative ways that entrepreneurs are coming up with, either lease programs or PPAs, or some type of financing for the average consumer, the average commercial entity. So some of the top markets on my list are Barbados, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, DOMREP. USVI has been a leader from the beginning. A lot of that has to do with the ITC, which is, it's nice for the investment tax credit. And then right on the heels is Bahamas coming up with a pretty robust net billing program. Second place, if I was an entrepreneur, I'd be looking at the energy efficiency market, particularly if you can finance the energy savings. So if you've got large warehouses, if you've got refrigeration facilities, you have grocery stores, you have villas, I'd be looking at ways to make that facility more energy efficient and really save that 45 cents a kilowatt hour that I saw earlier from the USVI. There's a lot of savings that you can do with that high of a bill. There's also like the full package services that we're seeing for villas and resorts, where an energy service company will do an audit. They'll do a lot of energy efficiency upgrades. They may add solar. They may do backup diesel and more high efficiency or dual fuel with maybe some propane or natural gas. Battery storage is starting to come into play as well, particularly for resiliency. And it's the very beginning. In St. Lucia, there's a company now, and Barbados is really popular. Matter of fact, they've been featured in Forbes, is Megapower. So they've got a very mature EV sales and rental company, and that's the photo you see there in the bottom. So those are kind of the growing Caribbean markets that are available now for entrepreneurs. And I see Kyle nodding, so I think these are probably the same things that are going to be profitable and available in the USVI. Some things that are on the forefront are bigger and better. So we're looking at EV charging infrastructure across islands where utilities can utilize that capacity for other purposes. EV bus fleets, there's a big tender that just came in Bermuda, and it looks like they're changing out the majority of their bus fleets to EV, which is super exciting. There's EV leasing opportunities where utilities are actually looking at buying a fleet of EVs and then leasing those out, sort of like rental cars, which is super interesting. Battery storage for utilities has already taken off. Several Carolec utilities already have batteries performing a lot of grid services. And of course, customers, I know customers personally in USVI that have already invested in battery storage for one reason or another. And some of the things that are probably on the horizon, storage as a service, where you actually buy storage for a purpose of your own home or business, but then you can sell that storage capacity to the utility. There's energy as a service, which is very similar to that. And virtual power plants, which is where all these resources come together with software to really, take the place of a traditional fossil fuel power plant, or at least augment a lot of that energy and capacity. And I've got a slide on that. But the one I skipped, and the one that we are really focusing on, it was in the 60 Minutes piece, and what we're doing in USVI on St. John, which I'll get into, as well as the Bahamas, is microgrids at critical facilities. We really think that's the entry point to the distributed model that everyone's been talking about. So what is a VPP? Just real quick, if anyone knows how the internet is structured, it looks like the power industry is going in a similar route, where energy and data are going to be exchanged across various customers and power plants and grid operators. And it's really going to be more of a automated software operation. That is pretty exciting for renewables, because renewables are going to probably make up the majority of the capacity in some of these VPPs that we're seeing piloted. But you can't get to a VPP overnight. You have to build to get there. All the rooftop capacity on USVI has to be coupled with software and batteries for WAMPA to make use of that. So it's very much a work in progress or an iterative process. So the entry point, microgrids at critical facilities, and I put in parentheses or dependent keys. So St. John is a dependent key. If you look at Abaco and the Bahamas, they have many dependent keys. In other words, they don't have their own power on these little islands. They have a submarine cable back to the main island. And that's exactly how St. John's is powered. So Obviously, during a storm, the most vulnerable part of the grid is the distribution system. You see the picture in the top right. It's fairly typical what it would look like even with a Category 2 or Category 3 storm. But undergrounding is really expensive. So what we're finding to be least cost is just try to get as much energy capacity near your critical loads as you can. And that could be cell phone towers, water treatment plants, hospitals, police and fire, et cetera. But it's not just sitting there like an old rusty diesel backup, right? It is a active asset of the utility every day, all day. It just happens to have that backup capability if the grid is down. So that's really the narrative, and that's really the philosophy behind these distributed assets. And we're really starting to see utilities and governments focus on these across the Caribbean. And we're really happy that FEMA has just funded the first microgrid of this size and capability in the USVI. That funding is allocated, and I think it'll be available in about 6 months. So we're excited to get moving on that with Kyle, his office, as well as WAMPA. Some other examples, Puerto Rico has many small microgrids that have been installed since the hurricanes. That's probably a pretty good business there in Puerto Rico. But given PREPA's difficulties, they're not really getting the value out of the microgrids as they would be in USVI, BVI in the Bahamas, because PREPA doesn't have a valuation of that energy and capacity on their side of the grid. So let me just jump right in. So the St. John microgrid, which was mentioned earlier, St. John has about a 7 megawatt load. They've got quite a bit of distributed generation already installed. I think the estimates were right around 3.5 megawatts, which is pretty good. But if anybody knows anything about those solar projects or their solar installation, as soon as the grid is down, those inverters are IEEE 1547, which means they can't backfeed the grid because you'll electrocute WAMPA workers, right? You'll electrocute the linesmen. So they actually have to shut down or go into an automatic transfer switch to some type of battery situation. Well, on the new configuration that we're helping WAMPA with, you will have the distributed generation. You will have another 4 megawatts of FEMA-funded solar, most likely ground mount on a leased piece of property. You'll have 8 to 10 megawatt hours of battery, as well as backup diesel. So you see the undersea cable between St. Thomas and St. John. If that's ever severed, or if St. Thomas has an issue with generation, St. John will decouple and go into microgrid mode, okay? And that will be seamless to everybody there. So we're trying to make that, as the batteries will pick up the load instantly, kind of like a data center picks up when the grid goes down for a data center. In addition to that, WAMPA will get a lot of value out of the solar and the battery for the St. Thomas grid, right? So there's a lot of exchange of capacity and energy across that submarine cable. So we're really excited about this because it's the first dependent key microgrid in the region. And we are on top of this because we want to make sure it's done right and we get as much value as we can for this to share those lessons learned across the region. But if you think about it, it's really the same configuration that a hospital would be. So pretend St. John there is a hospital in the middle of St. Thomas. Well, if they have their own energy and capacity, they can trade that with WAMPA during normal business operations. And if WAMPA's feeder is down, that hospital instantly goes into microgrid mode. And so the operating rooms, the respirators, the refrigeration of the medicines doesn't miss a beat. And that's really what it's all about. So we're focusing on human health and resiliency, but at the same time, really tiptoeing our way into the distributed architecture of what many of these futurists say our grid will look like, which everything's electrified and everything is online. So I think that's the majority of my talk. I will just say that, the large utility scale market is alive and well in the Caribbean. I'm glad I got that metric from Kyle. So 50 megawatts in the pipeline just in USVI, probably 30 plus in Bermuda, Bahamas, we're doing over 20. That's already been funded from the IDB. DOMREP is in the hundreds. St. Vincent's doing quite a number of projects, St. Lucia, Guyana, et cetera. So these aren't just concepts on a napkin. These are actual projects that have funding sheets and are on the books to move forward, which is really exciting. And I think the battery technology is going to become more and more prevalent because batteries do a lot of things that better and cheaper with zero fuel than generators do, you know, in terms of voltage support and frequency and spinning reserve. And then I mentioned the microgrid projects. I think we'll see more and more of those as they become cheaper than the grid, but also providing more benefits both for the grid and for public services. So if you guys have any questions, I'm here. My email address is just cburgess@rmi.org. And hopefully I'll have time to stick around for some of the other questions, but thanks for your time.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for your presentation. Next, we have our final presentation, Mike Bruno, the manager of Electric Wise Strategies, a St. Croix-based company, St. Croix-based renewable company, and he will discuss his experience doing business in the USVI in the renewable energy sector and share his advice for other entrepreneurs or investors who are interested in investing in this energy sector in the VI. Now I'll hand it to Mike.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon to everyone out there. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this. It was a great privilege to be invited. So my name, again, Mike Bruno. I actually have 3 companies. My U.S. Virgin Islands company is Electricity Wise Strategies. I have Energy Wise Strategies, a Delaware company, and then I have Solar Wise Strategies out of Puerto Rico. I've been in business now for 38 years this past July, 15 years licensed here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I think the main part of what I'm supposed to try to get across to prospectives, those who want to come to the islands, is how is the business atmosphere here? What is it like to be in renewable energy? My background is energy conservation, and so I've been appreciating all these comments. Per dollar, it's cheaper to reduce energy than it is to produce energy. And so that's what I always strive to do. Let's just not throw up a bunch of solar panels on an inefficient building. Let's make the building efficient, then we'll put up a smaller amount of solar panels, reduce the footprint. And I think that's a key when you're coming into the islands to do work. It's easy just to come in and, you know, this is what your requirements are, this is what we can do. I found that first 2 to 3 years of doing business here, I came at the end of 05, right in the beginning of 06 to 010, the new net metering program was starting, the 1-to-1, and it was slow to start. You know, change is one of the biggest things that's hard for people to make. But you started giving big incentives. There was local incentives. They were doing up to $12,000 rebates or 50% up to $12,000. People started looking at that. Of course, back in those days, solar cost us, just the panels, $450 a watt. That's going back. Now that we've seen this really take a good foothold, we've seen a lot of companies come into the islands, not just here, different places, but they come with the idea that they're just going to stay here for a little while, make a bunch of money, and then go to wherever the next active place is. It's so important, you know, we have a responsibility. If we're gonna be in the business arena and we're going to be providing a service, making generation of power for people, taking responsibility of putting a power plant on someone's roof, making sure that we have the training, the understanding, the knowledge, the credibility to do the very best that we can. It's so important not to just think I'm going to come in, make a bunch of money, and I'll be out of here. I've seen a handful of companies since I've lived here do that. They weren't all intentioned to do that. Circumstances change. But that being the case, we see, and I'm sure Kyle and others can vouch for this. We see a lot of companies come in. I call them the no permit companies. They come in, they just go out and do work. You know, who's going to take that responsibility someday? Well, that's the environment that I see throughout the Caribbean, not just here. It is a responsibility. And that being said, there is a lot of opportunity here. I'm not trying to ask for my future competition to come here, but good competition is healthy. It keeps everybody up to the right level, make sure we're doing the best that we can in the field that we're working. What kind of opportunities are there? Well, we talked about, I'll see if I can get my screen to share here. Let me see here. So here is a, can we see that? Everyone see that? Yes? Okay. So here is a microgrid we did. This is Caribbean Cinemas here on St. Croix. There's no utility on this plot of land at all. 208 kilowatts of solar, 400 kilowatts of batteries. It's a 480 volt system. And we have 3 generators. We use 1 generator, but we have triple redundancy because if there was ever a fire, you want to make sure you have a means of running that pump. So that's just the type of projects that people are looking at when they're starting to build anew. However, companies also, they want to start looking for ways to go solar. I don't recommend that people disconnect or burn that bridge with the utility. I find that it's good to have that utility in place. Let me see if I can move this.
Can you enlarge the picture, Mike?
Yeah.
Great.
Let me see here. Okay. So companies that want to, you know, they're tired of paying 45, 48 cents a kilowatt hour. They've done all the upgrades of efficiencies. Now they want to move to solar. I want to go off the grid. I don't think that's the way to go. A lot of people don't realize that's a big nut to crack. You know, you have to have someone that's always on staff to take care of your every need, because there's going to be glitches. Just like the utility has glitches, you have an island-wide power outage. Well, that's common to just the nature of what happens. So, you know, people are always quick to blame the utility. You know, working in the States for many, many years, the utility goes down a lot more than people realize. They just had a major power outage from these storms that came because, again, they have the same issues we have. They have above ground utilities, transmission, distribution. There's very little underground unless you're in a private development. And that's how it was spec'd out. So the same elements, it's just that we have more storms. So it's important that coming into the Caribbean region and doing work, you can end up with something that would look like this if you don't know what you're doing. Is that showing up? Is that on the screen?
No, if you click, it will show on the full screen.
Yeah.
All right, let me see. Is that showing up?
No, it's still a small picture. If you click it, it should show on the full screen.
You double click the picture.
Yeah.
It's taking my whole screen. No. Is that better? No.
No.
All right. Well, it doesn't matter. It's the federal courthouse here in St. Croix. It was just totally destroyed. Why? They had good panels, they had good inverters, but the structure, the foundation wasn't designed for these kind of winds. And so, you know, being proactive, the Department of DPNR has made it so that you have to have structures that are going to support at least 165 miles an hour. I think that should be like the starting point and go up from there. And it's not impossible to do. We have equipment. There you go. Yeah, you see that, right? You can see the problem was with the racking. The racking was just, and I've seen this racking used in the States, and that is a stateside racking. That's not a Caribbean racking. It was flimsy. You just go up and touch it. It shaked like the little doll you put on the front of your car. It just didn't have any substance to it. So when you think about doing work in the Caribbean, and I know there's a lot of really good companies out there. We have some good companies on the islands now doing work. And we have other companies, again, they're just in looking to do the work. But we have, if you go back one slide, I guess you're doing that for me.
Okay. Which picture?
Go back, I think it's two. Go back 2 pictures.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay, so this is a project that was just turned over. This is a low-income housing project. There's many of these that are taking place. We can see that all the site lighting is solar site lighting. In the back right-hand corner, there's an 85 kilowatt ground mount system that is taking care of the power needs of the community center. And everything in the buildings are all high efficiency. So you can see the solar water heaters that are on top of the buildings. So what a great example, you know, and this is the type of projects that we see coming into the Caribbean. You know, everyone's being more proactive now than they used to be. The Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority is being more proactive than I've ever seen them. I mean, yeah, they help to get off the ground, and we have these 2 big PPA projects, but like has been mentioned by Kyle, and you know, we have a lot of things slated for the future, big projects that's going to benefit the Virgin Islands, having energy storage systems so that these little brownouts won't happen. It'll just seamlessly go through the battery system while they can bring everything back up online. Being able to have a program in place again where people could actually tie into the grid and have the grid as their backup, but being able to be tied to it with a modest monthly charge. That's so important. And I think it's important for businesses. If you're going to do business, you need to work with all the utilities. You need to work with the energy office. You need to work with DPNR. When I first came here, the first stop I made was the Virgin Islands Energy Office. You know, you got to get to know everybody. You need to be their friend and help them to see that this is what you want to bring to the table. They need to know who's available in the territory. They're not going to recommend you because they can't do that. I mean, that would be not in line with what their purpose is, but they like to see what's happening, what you're doing, and what are the benefits that you're doing with the Virgin Islanders. And I think these are all important keys to really coming down here to run a business and to be ethical. Ethics is so important. It's unfortunate that people just feel that they can come in and do what they want. But the thing is, if you do it right, you'll always have plenty of work, always. Like I said, this will be 15 years this January, and I've never begged for work. I don't advertise. It'll search you out if you just do your best job you can. You'll make a lot of friends. The people here are beautiful. I'm not born here. And I tell my Virgin Island friends, me no banya babelanya. So you become part of the culture, and you fit right in. And that's because trust. You have to build trust. So that's what I found, working here. Again, I have competition, and I like to call them friendly competition because, sometimes you have to help each other out too. So, yeah, that's what it's all about. We're a big family here, and we can always take more family members. So, yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mike. Like you said, people here are very friendly, and it's a great community to do business in, and that's what differentiate U.S. Virgin Islands with a lot of other markets. Okay, with that said, that brings us to the end of the presentations, and now we're going to the Q&A portion of the webinar. If you have a question for any of the panelists, feel free to type in the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can now, and otherwise we'll answer them after the webinar. So Brian, do you want to select a few questions? And we'll answer all of them after the webinar, but for now we'll try our best to answer as many as we can. Okay, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Ihan. Yeah, we have a few questions coming in over the course of the panel discussion here. First one we have, I think specifically for Carl Knight. It's asking, how is legislation for PACE financing coming along in the USVI?
I might be able to chime in on that a bit as well. Yeah, we've definitely been in some pretty thorough discussions. That was actually one of the topics I was alluding to relative to the GVI investigating some options that we have, alternatives we have for enabling new financing methods here in the territory. So it's an ongoing process. I think we're continuing to look at the development and look at like what the actual legislation would entail, and making sure that all the pieces of the financing model can work here. And just for a quick overview for those who may not know what PACE financing is, it's a type of financing that actually is tightly tied to the property value of the location in which you are looking at developing either renewable or energy efficiency projects. It's a program that was initially presented as an option from the DOE, but administered through various states, and essentially what it allows is for a percentage of the property value to be kind of allocated as the max budget for a project, and that's what the financing amount would be, and it actually becomes repaid on your property taxes, how you actually pay back on the financing that was provided to develop both the renewable and energy efficiency projects. So that's kind of the general overview. There's a lot of logistics to how that financing mechanism actually can be implemented here in the territory. So that's what we're in the process of reviewing and making sure that based on our constraints, that it's something that would be feasible and beneficial to the territory.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Kyle. Let's see here. I think we have a couple more here. So probably for actually some of us more specifically here at the RT Park, they're asking, is the University of the Virgin Islands part of the drafting and development of proposed comprehensive land, water, energy, and air use strategic plan for future economic developments here in the USVI? Kind of a long-winded question, but.
Okay, I'll answer that one. So I'm the Business Development Advisor for Sustainability at the UVI RT Park. And currently we're working on the Sustainability Task Force for the Governor's Office in the US Virgin Islands. And we have subcommittees for energy, for ocean economy, for land conservation, etc. And we're drafting the territorial comprehensive action plan for all of those environmental or sustainability related development. Yeah, so we'll keep you updated. And for energy specific action plans, I think Kyle is leading the efforts for that. So yeah.
Yeah, we
Kyle,
actually,
you want to chime in?
we actually are in the process of putting together a memorandum of agreement or understanding with the Caribbean Green Technology Center, which is a division of UVI, to address the comprehensive energy strategy for the territory. So that was certainly be more than just including, and really going to be partnering directly with UVI on that. So from and I know that's a big kind of initiative for UVI as well, to kind of focus more in some of these long-term and these bigger picture strategic planning for the territory, and leveraging their academic and research resources to enable that.
Yeah, and currently we have the USVI and energy transition framework developed in partnership with the DOE and NRAW. So that's our guiding principle for the energy development for now. Yeah, okay, cool. Brian, do you see other questions?
Yeah, there's another one here. Let's see. Another one they're asking is, sorry, hold on. Went away from my tabs. Another question here is, what is the status on OTEC for the USVI? I think they're referring to ocean thermal energy conversion technology.
Yeah, so there, a couple of years ago, there was some discussion, and I know some presentations made to the legislature in regards to an OTEC proposal that was going to happen off the north coast of St. Croix and possibly the south of St. Thomas. I unfortunately don't have any updates on that. I know it was presented. I don't know if there was any substantial follow through following that presentation, or none that I'm aware of. So as of right now, there isn't any current development of OTEC here in the territory.
Okay, excellent. I think one more question here from the audience. What are some of the top reasons for why the USVI has a relatively high energy cost in the territory?
Kyle, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, I was going to turn to Chris, but I was like, no, that probably won't make any sense. Yeah, so for the Virgin Islands, one of the things that we're subject to is the high cost of fuel. Is always going to be a major driver for our cost, our high cost here in the territory. From a utility standpoint, there's also a significant amount of infrastructure that the utility has to support and manage across the 3 islands. So it's a fairly complex structure in which for the utility to operate, and it's certainly led to a high cost in the development as well as the maintenance of that infrastructure to be able to effectively provide the electricity to these 3 distinct islands. So that certainly has played into it. I think that there's certainly a little bit of catch up that we are, and I think a lot of the projects that we're referring to help us by alleviating the need for the fossil fuels as much as possible, or wherever realistic, to be able to leverage local resources as opposed to imported resources to meet the energy demand. But the current configuration has certainly put us in that place.
Maybe I could add a little bit to that too. We see also the smaller the plant, the more that it costs to run. And so we don't have just one plant. We have 2 major plants, one in St. Thomas region, one here in St. Croix. And so you have inherited problems with any plant operation. Now you've just doubled it. So yeah, like Kyle said, there's a lot of catch up to do, and they're making strides. But any Caribbean region, I mean, Puerto Rico is 22 to 24 cents a kilowatt hour. They have 3 million people, and they have a much bigger infrastructure. They can produce because they have more sources that they use to produce energy. So a lot of that has to do with 2 smaller plants too.
Awesome, great, thank you guys. think that's pretty much it for questions. Unfortunately, we've kind of run out of time at the moment. We have a few more for the audience, but like Ihan said, we'll try to address these and give the responses out at a later time. So
yes, yeah, and that's brings us to the end of the webinar. So I want to thank you again for all the panelists to participate. You provided amazing insights and experience and expertise to our attendees. So thank you so much. I also want to mention that we have 3 more webinars that are coming up throughout the week. So tomorrow from 1 to 2:15, we have a sustainable agriculture webinar session. And on Thursday, we have ocean economy session. And on Friday, we have a session talking about how to leverage RT Parks resources to maximize your investments in the territory. All of those webinar series sessions will happen from 1 o'clock to 2:15 p.m. So stay tuned, and please don't forget to register. Yeah, and we look forward to seeing you throughout the week for the webinar. And thank you again, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you all. We'll share the presentations to through email in the next few days.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all. All right, have a great rest of your day, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Good seeing you
All right.
guys.
Bye-bye.
take care.
Thank you, Carl. Okay.